I had been in my berth for about 10 minutes when at about 15 minutes after 11 o'clock I felt a slight jar, and then soon after a second one, but not sufficiently large to cause any anxiety to anyone, however nervous they may have been. However, the engines stopped immediately afterward, and I first thought, she lost a propeller. I went up on the top, boat deck, in a dressing gown, and found only a few people there, who had come up similarly to inquire why we had stopped, but there was no sort of anxiety in the mind of anyone. We saw through the smoking room window a game of cards going on, and went in to inquire if they knew anything. It seems they felt more of the jar, and, looking through the window, had seen a huge iceberg go by close to the side of the boat. They thought we had just grazed it with a glancing blow, and the engines had been stopped to see if any damage had been done. No one, of course, had any conception that she had been pierced below by part of the submerged iceberg. The game went on without any thought of disaster, and I retired to my cabin to read until we went on again. I never saw any of the players or the onlookers again. A little later, hearing people going upstairs, I went out again and found everyone wanting to know why the engines had stopped. On going on deck again, I saw that there was an undoubted list downward from stern to bow, but, knowing nothing of what had happened, concluded some of the front compartments had filled and weighed her down. I went down again to put on warmer clothing, and as I dressed heard an order shouted, "All passengers on deck with life belts on." We all walked slowly up with them tied on over our clothing, but even then presumed this was a wise precaution the captain was taking, and that we should return in a short time and retire to bed. There was a total absence of any panic or any expressions of alarm, and I suppose this can be accounted for by the exceedingly calm night and the absence of any signs of the accident. The ship was absolutely still, and except for a gentle tilt downward, which I don't think 1 person in 10 would have noticed at that time, no signs of the approaching disaster were visible. She lay just as if she were waiting the order to go on again when some trifling matter had been adjusted. But in a few moments we saw the covers lifted from the lifeboats, and the crews allotted to them standing by and curling up the ropes, which were to lower them by the pulley blocks into the water. We then began to realize it was more serious than it had been supposed, and my first thought was to go down and get more clothing and some money, but seeing people pouring up the stairs decided it was better to cause no confusion to people coming up by doing so. Presently, we heard the order. All men stand back away from the boats, and all women retire to next deck below, the smoking room deck, or B deck. The men all stood away and remained in absolute silence, leaning against the end railings of the deck or pacing slowly up and down. The boats were swung out and lowered from A deck. When they were to the level of B deck, where all the women were collected, the women got in quietly, with the exception of some who refused to leave their husbands. In some cases, they were torn from them and pushed into the boats, but in many instances they were allowed to remain because there was no one to insist they should go. Looking over the side, one saw boats from aft already in the water, slipping quietly away into the darkness, and presently the boats near me were lowered, and with much creaking, as the new ropes slipped through the pulley blocks down the 90 feet, which separated them from the water. One by one, the boats were filled with women and children, lowered and rowed away into the night. Presently, the word went round among the men. The men are to be put in boats on the starboard side. I was on the port side, and most of the men walked across the deck to see if this was so. I remained where I was, and presently heard the call, "Any more women?" Looking over the side of the ship, I saw the boat number 13 swinging level with B deck, half full of women. Again the call was repeated, "Any more women?" I saw none come on, and then one of the crew looked up and said, "Any women on your deck, sir?" "No," I replied. "Then you had better jump." I dropped in and fell in the bottom as they cried, "Lower away." As the boat began to descend, 2 women were pushed hurriedly through the crowd on B deck and heaved over into the boat, and a baby of 10 months passed down after them. Down we went, the crew calling to those lowering each end to keep her level. Aft, stern, both together, until we were some 10 feet from the water, and here occurred the only anxious moment we had during the whole of our experience.